Okay, so this is just a little advice on how to use creatine. Creatine is one of those supplements that hasn't been around relatively for a really long time. But there's a lot of confusion on how to use it, what's appropriate, what amounts are appropriate. So I'm just going to give you a few of the high points about creatine. First of all, before you start any supplementation program, make sure you consult a medical professional. Maybe even in some cases your local trainer, your own personal trainer, is a good point of reference to have, as they've probably, hopefully, got some experience with supplements and what's appropriate in supplementation practices. One of the first points I want to get to about creatine is making sure that you stay well hydrated. As creatine becomes, people experiment with it more, and the fitness and scientific community join to sort of create different forms of creatine. There are many different kinds on the market, but there are certain kinds that require you to be well hydrated. Now, in general, I recommend people stay well hydrated anyway, but particularly with some forms, when taken in large doses, creatine can become toxic, or can have toxic effects, I should say, particularly relating to creatine that's ingested that's then not used. So make sure you stay hydrated, because water acts as a transport system. It will help to flush out toxins of most any kind, and creatine is no exception. Also, you want to make sure that when you use creatine that you don't put it in any sodas or juices, no acid liquid bases. Okay, now in terms of loading with creatine, a lot of people at the front end of beginning to use creatine will want to know how much they should load. A general guideline for that is to use 0.3 grams of creatine per 2.2 pounds of body weight. Now, again, there are many different kinds of creatine on the market, so be sure that the creatine you're using, that you're taking into account the additives that are included in that creatine. That figure that I just gave you, the 0.3 grams of creatine per 2.2 pounds of body weight, is referring to pure creatine. So the dose might be larger or smaller depending on the kind of creatine that you're using. The amount of creatine that you can take in is directly related to your body mass. Okay, so when you load, generally a good guideline is 5 days to 7 days, 5 days to a week. The 0.3 grams, good loading figure. You don't want to unload on that cycle longer than about a month, 30 days. You want to decrease that intake to maintain whatever muscle you've gained at 0.03 grams per 2.2 pounds of body weight. Never load longer than 5 days to a week. And loading is also important to keep in mind. Loading is an option for creatine supplementation. It's not a necessity. People just do it to kind of hit the ground running. All right, as a last point, you want to make sure that when you're taking creatine, you do it on a regular schedule. It's very important to regiment it exactly. If you're using it sporadically, you're going to have sporadic results, possibly no results. Different kinds of creatine responds in different people's bodies different ways. So you're going to have to experiment to some degree with certain kinds. It comes in different forms: powder, crystallized, serums, tablets. There are different kinds, but then even those forms that you see on the shelves are different kinds of creatine. So keep that in mind, and just make sure that you're taking it on a regular schedule. If you're not exercising while you're taking creatine, then you're not doing yourself any good. Make sure you're doing that, and definitely consult a professional on a lot of the ins and outs of doing it. Find one that works in your body, and hopefully you'll see some really good results.